It's already 4:59. Let's sing Song of the Garden. The Lord into his garden comes, the spices yield a rich perfume. The lilies grow and thrive, the lilies grow and thrive. Refreshing showers of grace divine, from the Father flows to every vine, and makes the dead revive, and makes the dead revive. Oh, that this dry and barren ground in springs of water may abound. A fruitful soil become, a fruitful soil become. The desert blossoms as the rose, when the Savior conquers all his foes, and makes his people one, and makes his people one. Come, brethren, you that love the Lord, and taste the sweetness of his words. In Father's ways go on, in Father's ways go on. Our troubles and our trials here will only make us richer there. When we arrive at home, when we arrive at home. Let's all rise. Let's begin our Hoon dok hae by offering one stunning bow to our beloved two parents. Hanim gua, champung me, Zagery Oliver, Baro. Our most beloved Heavenly Parents, today, Wednesday, September the 23rd, 2015, here at Washington Family Church, National Cathedral. We pray for the success, the good health, and the protection of our two parents, with our true mother here on earth, still inspiring and leading us, and our true father who's in the spiritual world. We pray for the rest of the true children, the true grandchildren, and our elder sister, Sanjanin, the president of the Family Federation for World Peace, and her husband, Isuknin, the vice president of the Family Federation for World Peace. We pray for all the staff in the international headquarters in Chungcheong, Korea. We pray for all the umbrella organizations and the UPF chairman, Mr. Chang Chi-kyang, and his family, and all the continental leaders all over the world, especially here in North America and the Caribbean. We pray for Archbishop Kim and his family, and we pray as well for all the national leaders all over the world, especially here in America. We pray for Reverend Dr. Michael Malcolm and his wife Fumi, the children, his staff here at 4 West 430 Street, including Reverend Milton Stevens, his wife and child, the president of the Family Federation for World Peace, and all the regions and districts, especially here in District 1. We pray for all the district leaders all over the world, and our own Reverend Ernest Patton and his wife Keiko Patton and their children. And we pray for all the pastors and center leaders all over the world, especially here in the Mid-Atlantic area, from Tolson Center, Reverend James Stewart and his wife Auntie Kila and their children and their members there, and Reverend Akira Ota in Norfolk, Virginia, Father Elia Bayo in Richmond, Virginia. We pray for his wife Anna and their congregation there, as we pray for Mrs. LeJune in Northern Virginia in the Beltway, and Father or Reverend Pastor Reverend Robert Love of the Maryland Center. We pray for their success always, with co-pastors Reverend Jim Boothby, Reverend and Mrs. Greg Jones, and others. As we pray for the ACLC chairman also, that is residing here in Washington D.C. We pray for Archbishop Augustus Collins, his wife and 2 children. And we pray for our pastor, Reverend Zagery Oliver, his daughter Brianna, and their Fumi son, and all the blessed families who are connecting to Hoon dok hae and the Washington Family Church. We pray that all our activities will be a success this week and this weekend, and we pray for the success of our education of To the Blessing activity this coming Friday, and we pray for each other's success as we bring in our 430 couples to you, our Heavenly Parents. And we pray all of this in all our names, and in my name, Athanasius Francis de Catalan, blessed Saint Father. Aju, aju, aju. Good morning. We're still reading the booklet. To him I offer all the glory and honor. And now we have a new topic: the world unification and North and South unification will be accomplished by true love. And we're on page 25 right now on this booklet. Olympic Gymnastic Stadium, Seoul, Korea, February 10, 2000, year 2000. Distinguished guests whose fervent desire is for North and South unification, ladies and gentlemen, the new millennium that just begun is the time to clean away the divisions and conflicts of the past century and to manifest the ideal of one world family or of harmony and unification. I would like to begin by thanking you for congratulating me on my 80th birthday. Most of all, I would like to return to God all the honor and glory given to me, because it is He who has watched over me until this day. As I look back, I am reminded that my life has never been easy. My life has been intertwined with the suffering history of our people and the numerous difficulties that our people have undergone in the midst of great powers. As a boy of 16, I came in contact with the will of heaven through prayer, and throughout my life after that, I have devoted all my spirit and energy to accomplish God's will. I came to understand that the fundamental cause of human unhappiness is that the fall severed our relationship with God. As a result, human beings fell into a state of spiritual ignorance. In an effort to resolve the fundamental problems this has caused among human beings and in the universe, I have spoken publicly on more than 10,000 occasions in many places around the world and set forth a true view of humanity, a true view of the world, and a true view of history based on Godism. These speeches have been translated into 12 languages and published in 300 volumes. The contents of these speeches are not the result of comprehensive study of historical documents. My conclusions are not the result of scholarly research. Instead, I arrive at these answers to basic and fundamental questions through my communication with both the visible and invisible world. The issue of unifying the Korean Peninsula is the solemn desire of our people and final act of bringing the global Cold War to a conclusion. So today, as I express my gratitude for your having prepared this meaningful forum, I would like to share with you on the topic World Unification and North and South Unification will be accomplished by true love, and lay out the basic answer for how to bring about unification. We're now on page 26. Satan's target is God Himself. The unification of our country involves more than the mere unification of national territory. It begins with the unification of the human mind and body that were divided against one another as a result of the fall. This is the model for the unification of a world that has been divided in two. Thus, this issue must be understood from the perspective of God's salvation providence. It must be resolved on a providential level. What is Satan's ultimate target behind the history of struggle between good and evil? Ever since this conflict came into being as a result of the fall of the first human ancestors, Satan has had his sights set precisely on God Himself. God is eternal, unchanging, absolute, and unique, and the standard of the ideal were to ask God directly. I think He would confirm what I am saying. How can God reply when Satan says to God, God, when you made me an archangel in the beginning, we were acting out of love for me that was temporary or eternal. I think God must say that He made the archangel out of love that was eternal. If He were to say that His love was temporary, that would make Him an ephemeral God. Unless He maintains a standard of love, Satan eternally, unless He maintains a standard of loving Satan eternally, there will eventually come a time when He will no longer be able to exercise His authority as God with respect to Satan. Thus, no matter how much Satan may oppose Him, God has no choice other than to establish the conditions of loving Satan. Sin says to God, I became an evil scoundrel as a result of the fall. But you and good people can't use methods that are similar to mine, can you? I may like to fight, but you are not supposed to enjoy fighting. Even when you take a blow, you have to endure, don't you? Thus, God's philosophy is one of resistance. Why is that? It is because until the world of the heavenly ideal is manifested on the earth, God must love the archangel who became Satan, regardless of the circumstances. No matter how much trouble Satan may cause, God cannot punish him or cut him off. He must establish the condition of having loved Satan regardless of where he found Satan. God can only have complete victory when Satan confessed to him saying, "Oh God really is God. I surrender to you." This is the problem. We're on a subtopic right now. Jesus felt no malice. Because of this, God is in the position of being tied up by Satan. Since the principal path of the providence of restoration is for God to bring about Satan's surrender by loving him, we who are his children must walk the same path. And we're now on page 27. It doesn't matter if a person is persecuted around the world and is considered an enemy worldwide. This person must establish the condition of having loved those who oppose him. From this aspect, there is amazing truth in God's counsel to love your enemies. In fact, this is one of God's battle strategies. These words sound simple. No one realizes, though, that they have marked the boundary line between victory and defeat in the battle between God and Satan. If God were to adopt a philosophy of looking on Satan as his enemy and revenge against him, then God would never be able to stand on the pinnacle of victory. Thus, God has said, "Love your enemy," and has carried out a strategy of love. The words "love your enemy" also represent the culmination of Jesus' teaching. It is remarkable that Jesus, the only begotten Son of God, stood before Satan and prayed for him despite the fact that Satan was trying to kill him. If Jesus, as he hung dying on the cross, had held any feeling of malice toward his enemy, God's providence would have been turned completely around. It is because Jesus overcame death with a heart of praying that his enemies might be blessed, and of loving his enemies that Satan surrendered in that instance. This is where the qualification to be God's eternal child is fulfilled. Even Satan recognizes this qualification and gives his signature. You too will be able to stand before God and say, "Hey, Satan, am I not unmistakably the Son of God?" And Satan will reply, "Yes, that is correct. You must conduct ourselves in such a way that if we say to Satan, 'You have no problem,' if people who live as I do expand God's reciprocal realm, starting from the individual and moving to the family, clan, people, nation, and world, Satan's answer would be, 'That is within principle, so I can't do anything about it.'" And we're now on a different subtopic, the enemy nation. It is under these conditions that God has pursued the providence with the Christian cultural sphere at the center. Whether we find ourselves on the path of sacrifice, in the position of martyrdom, or in the midst of bloody battle, we must carry out a movement of loving God and loving even our enemies. We must carry out this movement in our families, in our societies, and in our nations. The Roman Empire severely persecuted Christianity, but it was forced to surrender in the face of the love that Christianity gave even to the country that was its enemy. This is how Christianity came to be a worldwide religion. The starting point for the path to heaven was within the country that was Christianity's enemy. Until now, Christians have only thought about loving their own personal enemies. But this is not enough. We must love the country that is our enemy, and even the world that is our enemy. The starting point on the path to heaven is within the country that is our enemy. Unless we create the foundation of tradition of true love and set out on the basis of this foundation, we cannot bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth. There can never be a philosophy or ideology greater than the tradition that is established in this way. We're now on page 28. When people was under Japanese imperial rule, the four providential countries, Korea, Japan, Germany, and the United States, were enemies. Given the circumstances of that time, Japanese and Koreans were enemies. Japanese and Americans were enemies. American and Germans were enemies. Yet, I practiced the way of true love of heaven by taking Japanese and Germans to America, their enemy country, and telling them that America was falling into ruin, that their help was needed to revive it. I emphasized to the Japanese and Germans that they could not establish a new thinking capable of leading humanity into the new world that heaven desires unless they set the condition of having loved their past enemy. America, even more than their own fatherland, I set forth this tradition of true love and created a new beginning, unless people erect a base and tradition by which they love the countries that are their enemies. The kingdom of heaven cannot be realized on earth. It is only within the true love of God that such a historic tradition can be constructed. Now on page 29, we have a subtopic here, My Testimony. When I was humiliated by the United States federal government and unjustly brought before a court of law, my response was actually to work harder to give life to America by founding the conservative newspaper, the Washington Times, and broadcasting station. Recently, I have been pursuing an effort to gather prominent strategy planners from around the world in order to assist China. This is one example of how all the organizations that I have founded are ready to involve themselves in any effort of heaven that requires love. In the future, even those with superior ability will find themselves ruled by others if they have not accumulated accomplishments in true love. Everyone here needs to bear this in mind. I was involved in the anti-Japanese resistance movement under the Japanese imperial rule, and from that perspective, the Japanese people were my enemy. This was true for the Korean people as a whole, and for me individually. Yet, after Japan's defeat in World War II, I gave love to Japan. After the war, I could have reported the police who has taken me into custody and tortured me severely for my activities in the underground independence movement. Had I done this, they all would have been executed. When I came across a Japanese policeman who was running for his life, however, I packed some things for him and helped him escape to safety under the cover of darkness. Do you know why so many young people in Japan place their eternal lives at stake and pledge their loyalty to me? This is because there is a principle of cause and effect which dictates that they must return what has been given them. It is because I planted the seeds of true love in the world, transcending national boundaries and in accordance with God's heart. It is because I planted the artistic foundation that leads people to a life of loving the countries that were the enemies of their own country. Thus, Japan today is my prisoner. Without even realizing it, Japan is fulfilling its heavenly calling. Under Japanese rule, I had reason to harbor resentment, even toward the Emperor of Japan. But he has already been defeated. Heaven does not strike a person who is defeated. In fact, heaven shows mercy toward those who understand their sin and apologize. Because this is heaven's way, a person who raises a sword and strikes a defeated person will find his own descendants driven to ruin. The United States is also a country that considered me their enemy. However, I left my family behind and diverted my attention from my Korean fatherland to bring salvation to America. I threw away everything that belonged to me in order to bring salvation to the world under Satan. It's 5:29. We're now on page 30. We have a few more paragraphs here. The responsibility of Christians. Think too of how much hatred the established Christian denominations have directed toward the Unification Church. It might be said that we are enemies. We must not fight each other as enemies. However, we must come together in love. What would happen if we were to come together in love? The two coming together in love would lead the Republic of Korea into fulfilling the will of heaven, so as to digest North Korea. If the established denominations and the Unification Church had become one immediately after Korea's liberation from Japan, everything would have been solved. Because that did not happen, we have had to make extraordinary sacrifices to overcome enemies of the individual, enemies of the family, enemies of the clan, and enemies of the people in order to attain the position that we would have reached in the first place had there been no conflict. We have worked so to overcome the path of suffering where we are not able to strike at enemies. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all the people in North Korea have arrived themselves with Juche thought. We must arm ourselves with the philosophy of true love that is capable of digesting them. North Korea is a part of the northern culture that has been influenced by the cold winds of the Soviet culture. You must work to naturally melt them with our warm region civilization. Otherwise, both countries will go to ruin. Thus, we must thoroughly arm ourselves philosophically. This philosophy must not be one that seeks the fulfillment of individual desires. Rather, it must seek the salvation of all humanity. It must be centered on the self, not be centered on the self. Communists have the idea that everyone should work for the sake of a few top party leaders. This is why they eliminate any person who stands out as a potential rival. We are not that way. Our idea is to unite with the reciprocal environment in order to establish a reciprocal standard of higher level. That is Cain and Abel becoming one in order to receive their parents on a higher level. So I think that ends our Hoon dok hae. It's already 5:33. Yeah, today we started with a new topic on page 25. World unification and North-South unification will be accomplished by true love. So is there anybody who wants to share about our reading today? Anyone? So here we know, about True Father's history. That when he was at 16, a boy of 16, he came in contact with the will of heaven through prayer and throughout my life. After that, I have devoted all my spirit and energy to accomplish God's will. So on the Easter Sunday in North Korea, he had a spiritual encounter of Jesus. And Jesus was asking him to continue his mission. And I think Jesus did it 5 times until he accepted, and since then he was on the path to really liberate God and Jesus Christ, and even pay indemnity also for all the saints. As we know, in 1960 he had his own blessing, then 61, 36 couples representing Old, New, and the completed Testament, 12 couples each, and it went on to 72 couples, 120 couples, and then 430 couples, 77 couples, and it went up to 2,075, 6,000, 8,000, and in 1992 there were 30,000 couples. And my blessing on 1995 was 360,000 couples. So all can be seen in the Guinness Book of World Records. The matchmaker, one of the greatest one, of course, is no other than our true Father. And also the mass weddings, we broke all records there for gathering in Seoul Stadium. So also it was in the Guinness Book. So we also read today about Jesus felt no malice, meaning he even prayed for his enemies, and that they will be blessed, and loving his enemies even though he was there, dying on the cross. So that's what we learn from even God himself, because God is one with Jesus. At the time, 2,000 years ago, he loved his enemies. So as we learn also, even as God himself, he has to love even Satan. So he cannot just be an ephemeral God as we learn today, but a God that is eternal, unchanging, and all-powerful. So he should not, be temporarily just loving Satan, but love Satan eternally. And we read also about today the enemy nations. So anybody who wants to share with that? So Father shared his testimony today that he was, he was in the anti-Japanese resistance movement, because of course he is Korean, and it come to a point that the war, there was a Japan really was defeated in World War II, and the Japanese police who have tortured him and everything, could have been executed if he reported them, but he never reported them. And then he saw also one Japanese policeman running for his life. He packed some things for him and helped him escape even to safety under the cover of darkness. So that's how he loved his enemy. And right now, of course, there are many Japanese members in our movement, and even in Pyongyang. Right now, we have a hotel there in North Korea, and it is run by our Japanese brothers and sisters. And the people around them think that they are more devoted to their Reverend Moon, even though he's not there, the true parents, than Of course, Kim Il-sung before, and of course Kim Jong-il, and now we have Kim Jong-un. Of course, they have satellite TV, so all the bigwigs or generals stay there and hang out there in that hotel that is allowed by North Korea. So, anybody else? Yes? Yeah, we have Reverend Ezra here.
Yes, on page 30. Did we reach there?
Yeah, we reached page 30, the last.
Did we read Liberate Without Fighting?
The next topic, no. Just the one.
Responsibility of Christians?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, I think my feeling that these words we read this morning is about the responsibility of Christians.
The Pope is here.
Oh yes, and the Pope is here representing Christianity. So just to read this, because on second paragraph, because that let me read from a little forward here. If the established denominations and the Unification Church had become one immediately after Korean liberation from Japan, everything would have been resolved. Because that did not happen, we have had to make extraordinary sacrifices to overcome enemies of the individual, enemies of the family, enemies of the clan, and enemies of the people in order to attain the position that we would have reached in the first place had there been no conflict. We have worked to overcome the path of suffering where we were not able to strike at enemies. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, all the people of North Korea have armed themselves with due thought. We must arm ourselves with the philosophy of true love that is capable of digesting them. North Korea is a part of Soviet culture. We must work to naturally melt them with our warm region civilization. Otherwise, both countries will go to ruin. Thus, we must thoroughly arm ourselves philosophically. So, that's what True Father, and if you read the introduction of the Divine Principle, it says towards the end, creating a philosophy that supersedes all the cultures of the past, because when we see things like after Moses, at the time of surrounding Jericho and everything, there had to be a fight to conquer the enemy. And there was handing over of the providence from Moses to Joshua, and they fought. They went on, Joshua and Caleb went on making conquest and fighting until they recaptured Canaan. But we see that when that happens, the enemy never forgets how you treated them, and they remain with resentment, and it becomes a point of division, and it becomes a point of separation, and generation from generation growing, knowing that these are people who conquered us by fighting, and always they are thinking of how they can later it and overcome you also by fighting. So that is not the method that should be applied towards the last days, because fighting only ends up extending enmity. But if we become people who love our enemy and send gifts to our enemy and invite our enemy and continue sending gifts to our enemies, if you do this over a long period of time without you ever giving up that this is the only method that continues section by section, beat by beat, melting the heart of the people you conquered. You conquered by them by fighting, but that you have to diffuse any more fighting by the formula that Jacob applied with his brother Esau. And this is where we learn that Jacob gave everything to his brother and recognized his brother as to have the face of God. And this reduced his enmity with his brother. So this formula looks to me like the only formula that will win towards the end. And then the next step after you win or reduce the enmity, the degree of enmity, when you live with your enemy and continue serving them and continue letting them benefit more than you, knowing that you are the one with the blessing of God. Like Jacob knew he's the one who got the blessing from his brother and his father. So he gave that same blessing back and continued to serve and live with his brother without him ever wanting to separate. Then that way we can conquer by no more war, no more creating wounds, no more bloodshed, no more enmity. But instead of letting your enemy look like he's taking advantage of you, you keep on giving everything. Whatever you get, whatever you build, go and share it, and that way you keep on melting the heart of the enemy. And God is waiting for us to represent that philosophy of serving, sacrificing, self-denial and service to our enemy endlessly, no time period, the end period of that is when your enemy also wants to start to give back to you. When you see your enemy beginning to give back to you, and they are willing to share things also they feel they're provoked to give to you and to love you back, then you know you have created a lifestyle with your enemy of true love. And I think this is the extent that God is waiting for us to reach, for America to reach, for Christianity to reach, and for Unification Church to reach and resolve black and white issues, resolve Africans from the motherland with African Americans from here in America and the diaspora or wherever else they are. We continue to use this philosophy of sacrifice, self-denial, service, until the enemy begins to behave the same way. Then that way we know we have made the victory, and then we know that way we can now substantiate our responsibility. It becomes substantial, and that way now we can remove the world of enmities. Japanese, as True Father has said, and Korea. We have to resolve that enmity until we are willing to, both enemies are willing to sacrifice, to love, to serve, to self-deny themselves for the sake of each other. So, this is what I would like to share this morning. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Ezra. Anybody else? Anybody else wants to share? So Father reminds us right now that we just don't need to love our enemy, individual enemy, but also even the country and even the world, if it's your enemy. As we have learned in Korea itself, when he established the Unification Church, he was persecuted and was opposed by all sides, even the government, the police station, and everything, and all the Christian denominations. So right now he's reminding, so it's very timely, the Pope is here, that the responsibility of Christians is to love not their individual enemies, but to love, the people above you, below you, and of course the families, clan, and the enemies of the people. In order to attain that position, we have to, exert a lot of effort. As Reverend Ezra has made, we have to give service and sacrifice, and that's the way to melt the enemy's heart. In fact, in the South, also in my country, the only way we can appease these people is we give them the things that they want, give them the rule. They have an autonomous region, and also they were given some seed money that they can start with their rehabilitation. So we're kicked out. I have to call back again.
Yeah,
Please announce yourself.
I'm back. So tomorrow we'll be reading about liberate without fighting. So anybody else wants to share about our reading today? So I think the word is enmity. We need to really exert a lot of effort to overcome hatred or enmity, because we have some kind of history also that we need to overcome. We have to love the people who persecuted us, or even the countries that invaded us before. So as Father said, he brought Japanese, Germans, and Koreans, of course, and people here in America, the ones who were fighting before, Japanese and Koreans, and Europeans, and Germans, of course Germany, and then they brought them all here and let them work together as one. And I just also have read the testimony of our German missionary, my national messiah in my country, Reverend Schwaller. He gave testimony that as a German, he was asked by Reverend Moon to work with Americans and Japanese and Koreans, side by side, those people who were enemies of his country before, and they have to work in harmony. And he served in many countries in Asia, in India, in Nepal, and he went to Afghanistan, and of course he went to Thailand, and then he volunteered even to my country, the Philippines, and went to the south, where there's a lot of Muslims and many, people there who are also, there was a lot of conflict there also, and he was there. And this is the testimony of a brother who was brought by our founder, the true parents. I know some of them also, even we call Lolo, or grandfather, Lolo Ulrich, who was German also, who was assigned also to the Philippines and many parts of, he had a plaque for doing this 24 years of missionary work. He was given that award for bringing a lot of spiritual children and working in a country who was more or less, influenced by America. So it was hard for him, but he overcome. So that's the training that our true Father is giving us, to love not only our individual enemies, but the countries that were enemies, and even our ancestors too. So anybody else who wants to share? It's already 5:58 about our reading today. So if there's none, let's all rise and have unison prayer. Our most beloved Heavenly Parents, we're so thankful for this reading, this speech today about Jesus and our God living for the sake of others, or loving one's enemy. And we pray, our Heavenly Parents, that we can share this with our friends and relatives, that we need to establish this kingdom of heaven here on earth, so that we can go to the spiritual world in heaven also. And it will be the kingdom of heaven that we have established here with the help of all the
good spirits, our good ancestors that always influence us to do good and be sacrificial and live for the sake of others. We pray for each other's success as we bring in all the people that God has already prepared. We pray for all the churches around here that they will come, and we can invite a pastor to give us a prayer at the end of our Sunday service. One pastor every week we can bring here for a blessing prayer, so that they will know their hearts as they learn about our church. We pray for this to happen, and we pray all of this in all our names and in my name. Athanasius Francis C. Catalan, bless Central Family. Adieu, adieu, adieu. Uri esonen tom il numero sonen tom il imo sambacho sotom il tom il io ora ipiore saninen tongil inarachadende tongil io suora tongil ora. Good morning to you, our beloved teachers, our beloved true parents of heaven and earth and humankind. Good morning to you, the true children, true grandchildren, and all our brothers and sisters. Good morning. Yes, good morning. Have a great and wonderful day. Manse manse. Okay, take care everyone. Today there will be a lot of traffic here in Washington D.C. because the Pope is here giving Mass in the Catholic, in the Basilica, in the Catholic University. Okay, have a great day. Bye-bye.